Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here, former federal prosecutor, former Army JAG, and we have got to take on Donald Trump's claim today that General Mike Flynn is being tormented by dirty cops. That's what Trump said today. Of course, let's also remember what Trump tweeted previously, back when people could still convince him or cajole him into telling even a little bit of the truth, even if only fleetingly. Donald Trump tweeted, "I had to fire General Flynn because he lied to the vice president and the FBI. He has pled guilty to those lies." Boy, that was a rare moment of truth and candor from Donald Trump. So let's talk about who Mike Flynn is, what he did, what the FBI did, and where we are now. Most importantly, why what the FBI did was not only not outrageous, they weren't tormenting anybody, they were actually doing their job, trying to investigate crime and keep the country safe. So here's what happened. First of all, Mike Flynn was caught talking dirty on the phone to the Russians. What do I mean by that? So in police speak or prosecutor speak, for example, if you are riding in your car and you have an illegal firearm in your car, that's called riding dirty. If you get caught on a T3, a wire, or on an intercept where we are, the government, the police, the FBI is listening to your phone call, and we catch you talking about crime, talking about things that you're not entitled to talk about or not entitled to do, particularly as a national security advisor or future national security advisor, we call that talking dirty on the phone. Mike Flynn was talking dirty on the phone to the Russians. Talk about something that is supremely dangerous to our national security. It's Michael Flynn abusing his position. So the FBI had to interview Mike Flynn about his conversation with the Russians about maybe lifting sanctions, a conversation he should not have been having. So the FBI interviews Mike Flynn. Hey, did you talk with the Russians on the phone? Nope, didn't talk with the Russians. That was a lie. It was a lie to the FBI. It was a lie to the FBI by somebody in the highest echelons of power in our federal government and to whom we entrust our national security. Frankly, you don't have to be the FBI or the police or a prosecutor to realize just how wrong and how dangerous and how unlawful that is. So he lied to the FBI. After he lied to the FBI, what did he do? He walked into court, he raised his right hand, he took an oath, he swore to tell the truth, and he pled guilty. He told Judge Sullivan, "I did it, I broke the law, I lied to the FBI, I knew it was wrong, and I am pleading guilty knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily." Why? Because I broke the law. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Flynn committed the felony crime of lying to the FBI in violation of 18 U.S.C. 1001. That's the federal code provision that he violated. So now what do we have? We have the release of some notes and some emails from FBI agents talking about how they were going to approach the interview of Michael Flynn. This is a pretty consequential interview. And in those notes, it says things like, how should we approach this? Should we try to get him to tell the truth? Should we try to get him to lie? Should we consider prosecution against him? Should we consider having him fired, removed from his position? So this was the kind of tactical conversation that in my 30 years as a federal prosecutor, I had countless times with the law enforcement agents with whom I was working a case. And you have these tactical discussions, whether you're going to interview a target of your investigation or a subject who is not a target but might have done something wrong, or just a straight up witness who you suspect might lie because maybe they're going to try to protect a friend or an associate. So before any consequential interview like this, you're going to have tactical discussions about how do we approach this interview and what's our goal. Well, so the goal here, they decided, was to frankly, and I'm reading between the lines here, and I paraphrased what we saw in the emails and the notes. They're online, you can read them. They decided the goal was to ask open-ended questions and see if Mike Flynn was going to tell the truth. Did they give him an opportunity to lie? You bet they did. Did Michael Flynn lie to the FBI? You bet he did. And that is supremely dangerous to our national security. Now, they didn't set him up. There was no perjury trap. There were simply discussions about how do we approach it, what is our goal, and how do we go about interviewing Mike Flynn. So let's talk about the nuts and bolts of tactical interviews in criminal investigations. You know, the last thing you do when you're going to interview a witness or a suspect or a target is walk into the interview and tell them all the evidence you have. Show all your cards. Mike Flynn, don't say anything. We know you were talking with the Russians. We know you were talking about lifting sanctions. We know that you shouldn't have been doing that. So let's talk about that. That's not what you do. What you do is you go in and you see if the witness is going to be truthful and candid and forthcoming and accurate when you're asking them the questions. So there is nothing wrong. In fact, there's everything right about doing it the way the FBI did it. Going in, open-ended questions. You do not lay out your evidence, nor are you required to read anybody their rights before you interview them, because Criminal Law 101, you got to read somebody their Miranda rights, but only if they're in custody. Not if it's an interview in a non-custodial setting. There was no custody here. There is no legal right, there's no ethical right, there's no moral requirement to read somebody their Miranda rights. So let's just knock that out of the box. So they gave Mike Flynn the opportunity to lie, and boy did he take it. And that indicated that this was not a man who had any business having a security clearance, being a national security advisor, putting our country at risk. Here's the one thing that I think you may see in those notes that may cause you to pause or raise an eyebrow. They discussed not only whether they should let him lie or lay out their cards and try to get him to tell the truth, should they, conduct this interview with an eye toward prosecution. They also said, well, what about with an eye toward getting him fired, having him lose his job? Now, I will tell you, having been a prosecutor for 3 decades, that is not something that we ordinarily talk about. Why? Because that's just a collateral consequence to our criminal investigation. What we're focused on, what we're concerned with is, do we have evidence of crime? And if so, what is this witness or this suspect going to tell us about it? And then what do we do with that information? So getting people fired is generally not part of the calculus, unless the person is holding a job that is of national security consequence to our country. Then, frankly, it might be just as important that somebody who is compromised, that somebody who is susceptible to blackmail because he talked dirty to the Russians and then lied to the FBI about it, which makes him susceptible to blackmail, that is somebody who absolutely must be removed from his job. He has no business making national security decisions for the country, for the people. So it may be unusual, it may be an outlier, and it may catch people's attention and cause them to raise an eyebrow. But I suggest that in the setting of this investigation and the high stakes consequences of a compromised national security advisor, it's not outrageous, it's not inappropriate for them to have had strategy discussions about all of these things before they walked into that room and asked General Flynn if he'd ever spoken on the phone with the Russians about sanctions. So let's circle back for a minute to some of the court hearings in the Michael Flynn case. I was in Judge Sullivan's courtroom for some of them. And if Michael Flynn really thought that he had been fooled or forced or tricked into lying to the FBI, he had multiple opportunities to tell Judge Sullivan exactly that. Let me read a short excerpt from one of the court hearings in the Flynn case. Judge Emmett Sullivan asks him, and I quote, "Do you wish to challenge the circumstances under which you were interviewed by the FBI?" Michael Flynn's answer, "I was aware that lying to the FBI was a crime." Judge Sullivan, "Do you believe that you were entrapped by the FBI?" Flynn's answer, "No." Flynn's guilty plea was knowing, voluntary, intelligent. He had no defense. He was not entrapped by the FBI, nor was he tricked, nor was he coerced. He pled guilty because he was in fact guilty. It is actually a requirement for a judge to accept a guilty plea in a criminal case that the judge believes, based on the evidence and the information presented, that the defendant is actually guilty of the crime and is pleading guilty knowingly, voluntarily, intelligently, and with a factual basis to plead guilty. Michael Flynn couldn't be guiltier. So, was Michael Flynn tormented by dirty cops, as Donald Trump said today? No, he wasn't. But you know, criminals hate cops. That's why Trump hates the FBI. Stay safe, folks. Stay coronavirus free, and I look forward to talking with you again soon.